At what was supposed to be a happy family dinner, my daughter-in-law leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered the 7 words that would ignite a war. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby." She smiled, a cruel, triumphant little twist of her lips, and added, "You pathetic old woman." She expected me to scream, to cry, to crumble right there at the head of my own dining table. She didn't know who she was dealing with. I simply laughed. "I'm so glad you're here to listen to my story. Before I dive into how this nightmare unfolded, I'd love it if you'd let me know in the comments what city, or even what country you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this." Now let me take you back to that Sunday, the last day of my old life. My name is Eleanor Miller, and at 65 I believed my life was a well-tended garden, cultivated with care over decades. Our sprawling 2-story colonial in a quiet, leafy suburb of Columbus, Ohio, was more than just a house. It was a repository of 43 years of memories with my husband Richard. We had a rhythm, a comfortable cadence built on shared sunrises, the rustle of the morning paper, and the quiet understanding that comes from knowing another person's soul. Our son Michael was the heart of that life. At 43 he was a successful architect, but more importantly he was a good man, kind to his core and trusting to a fault. This, I would soon learn, was his greatest vulnerability. And he was hopelessly in love with his wife of 3 years, Chloe. That evening was meant to be a celebration of normalcy. A classic Sunday dinner. The house was filled with the comforting scent of rosemary and roasted chicken, a smell that had always meant home to Michael. The mahogany dining table, a wedding gift from my parents, was set with the good china, its delicate floral pattern a testament to generations of family gatherings. Golden light from the chandelier Richard had bought me for our 20th anniversary bathed the room in a warm, forgiving glow. It was a scene of domestic perfection. It was a lie. A storm was brewing just beneath the surface, an electrical charge in the air that only I seemed to feel. I felt it in the way my Richard, wouldn't meet my eyes. At 72 he was still a handsome man, his silver hair always neatly combed, his blue eyes usually so full of warmth for me. Tonight, however, they were fixed firmly on his plate, as if the pattern on the porcelain held the secrets of the universe. He was a closed book, a stranger at the head of my table. Chloe sat across from me, a queen surveying her new kingdom. At 28, she was a whirlwind of sharp angles and calculated smiles. From the moment Michael brought her home, I'd sensed something predatory about her. The way a hawk circles before it strikes. She studied people, cataloging their weaknesses for later use. Tonight she was glowing, but it wasn't the soft, gentle glow of a happy mother-to-be. It was harder, sharper, like the glint of light off a knife's edge. Triumphant. Her perfectly manicured hand kept straying to her still flat stomach, a subtle, repeated gesture designed to draw our attention, to prime us for the bombshell she was about to drop. "Mom, you've outdone yourself again," Michael said, his voice booming with the genuine appreciation he brought to everything. He was a man without guile, a trait that made me both proud and perpetually worried. He was cutting his steak with focused attention, his dark hair falling across his forehead just as it had when he was a boy, utterly oblivious to the undercurrents of tension in the room. "Mother Eleanor is such a wonderful cook," Chloe purred, her voice dripping with a cloying sweetness that felt acidic to my ears. Such a devoted wife and mother. The way she emphasized the word devoted was a subtle twist of the knife, a secret warning that only I could understand. Then came the announcement. "I have some news," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet chatter. "News that will change everything for our family." She stood up gracefully, a vision in emerald silk. "I'm pregnant." The room erupted. Michael's face was a portrait of pure, unadulterated joy. He jumped up, wrapping his wife in a bear hug, whispering, "I'm going to be a dad," over and over. "Mom, Dad," he beamed at us. "You're going to be grandparents." I should have been overjoyed. I should have been weeping with happiness. Instead, a knot of ice formed in my stomach as I watched Chloe's eyes over my son's shoulder. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at Richard. And in her gaze, I saw the triumphant checkmate of a long and calculated game. It was then, as Michael finally released her to pour champagne, that she made her move. She walked slowly around the table, stopping beside my chair. She leaned in as if for a congratulatory hug. Her lips brushed my ear, and the poison dripped out. I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you pathetic old woman. The world went silent. All I could hear was the venom in her voice and the frantic, panicked beating of my own betrayed heart. What was I supposed to do? For a single terrifying second the world tilted on its axis. The fine china, the gleaming silver, the smiling face of my son. It all threatened to slide into a black roaring abyss. Chloe's words were a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. 1,000 screaming reactions fought for release. I could have overturned the table. I could have slapped the smug, triumphant smile off her face. I could have collapsed into a heap of tears, giving her the dramatic, messy scene she so clearly craved. But then something else took over. It was a cold, hard clarity, rising from a deep, primal place of self-preservation. Panic screamed, how could he? How could Richard, my husband of 43 years, do this? It was a primal cry against a lifetime of trust. But wisdom, the quiet, steady kind you only earn after 65 years on this earth, whispered back. Play the long game, Ellie. Do not give her the satisfaction. Do not show her your wound. So I laughed. It wasn't a hysterical sound, not a gasp for air. It was bright, clear, and utterly dismissive. It rang through the dining room, cutting through my son's joyful toast like a bell. I saw the flicker of confusion in Chloe's sharp green eyes. This wasn't the reaction she had scripted. My calm composure was a deviation from her plan, and it threw her off balance. I leaned back slightly in my chair, the solid wood a comforting presence against my spine, and I met her gaze. Oh, honey, I said, my voice as smooth as cream, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Don't you worry about a thing. I picked up my champagne flute, my fingers surprisingly steady around the delicate stem. I raised it high, the bubbles catching the chandelier light like tiny, captured stars. To new beginnings, I said, my eyes finding my son's and holding his gaze, pouring all the love and strength I could muster into my smile. I would not let her poison this moment for him. And to family. The rest of the dinner was a blur. A performance of a lifetime. I was Meryl Streep on the stage of my own life, playing the role of the delighted grandmother-to-be. I asked about due dates and potential names. I discussed nursery colors and whether they thought the baby would have Michael's eyes. I smiled when expected. I laughed at the right moments, all while a silent earthquake was leveling the foundations of my world. Inside I was screaming a single, unending question. How long? How long had this been going on? How many of our quiet Sunday mornings, our shared breakfasts, our comfortable silences had been a lie? When they finally left, Michael chattering excitedly about college funds and Chloe shooting me one last smug look from the passenger seat, the facade crumbled. The front door clicked shut, and the strength drained out of me. I stood in my kitchen, the warm heart of our home, and it suddenly felt cold and foreign. I began loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision, the clinking of plates a harsh, lonely rhythm in the crushing silence. Richard appeared in the doorway, his shoulders slumped not just with age, but with a guilt so heavy it seemed to physically weigh him down. He looked like a stranger in the house he'd lived in for decades. Ellie, he started, his voice rough with words unsaid. Not tonight, Richard, I said, my back still to him. My voice was flat, devoid of the warmth he had known for 43 years. I couldn't look at him. If I looked at him I would break, and I couldn't afford to break. Not yet. I can't. I heard him sigh, a sound like air leaking from a punctured tire. I heard his weary footsteps retreat up the stairs to the bedroom we had shared for over 4 decades, a room that now felt like a crime scene. I couldn't follow him. Maybe not ever again. Sleep didn't come. How could it? I lay awake in our king-sized bed, a vast empty space stretching between us. I listened to the rhythm of his breathing, a sound that had been my comfort for a lifetime, and now it was the sound of a stranger, a traitor. Every familiar creak of the house settling, every distant hum of the refrigerator, seemed amplified, mocking me in the darkness. I finally slipped out of bed and went downstairs. I stood alone in my silent kitchen, the ghost of my family's laughter still hanging in the air. The remnants of the roast sat on the counter, a testament to a life I no longer recognized. She had declared war at my own table, and I, Eleanor Miller, had no intention of losing. My battle was just beginning. Morning came, thin and gray, the weak sunlight struggling to push through the November clouds. I moved through my routine on autopilot, a ghost in my own home. Coffee for two, a habit too ingrained to break. Whole wheat toast cut diagonally just the way he liked it. Eggs over easy for Richard. As I placed his plate in front of him, I didn't see my husband of 4 decades. I saw a puzzle, a man whose familiar face now concealed 1,000 secrets. The familiar lines around his eyes, the slight stoop of his shoulders, were these the marks of age or the roadmap of his deceit? "Sleep well?" he asked, his eyes hidden behind the wall of the morning paper. It was a cowardly act and we both knew it. "Fine," I lied. The word hung in the air between us, as brittle as a dead leaf. The silence wasn't empty. It was a living thing, thick and suffocating with everything we weren't saying. I could feel the weight of his guilt, the pressure of my suspicion. Finally, he folded his paper with a sigh, the crisp sound unnaturally loud in the tense quiet. "I'll be working in the garden today," he announced, his voice carefully neutral, as if discussing the weather. "The roses need to be covered before the first frost." Working in the garden. It had been his sanctuary, his escape. Now the phrase sounded like an alibi. How many times had he used that excuse over the past few months to cover his tracks? I watched him walk away, the familiar comfort of his presence now replaced by a chilling uncertainty. After he left, I sat with my cooling coffee and began to assemble the puzzle in earnest. The pieces had been there all along, scattered in plain sight. I had just been too trusting, too comfortable in my own life, to see the ugly picture they formed. 3 months ago, the odd showers. It wasn't just his usual morning routine. He'd suddenly start rinsing off after just an hour in the yard, or right before dinner when we weren't going anywhere special. "Don't want to smell like dirt and fertilizer," he'd said with a casual shrug. I'd accepted it. Now it seemed more like he was washing away a different kind of filth. 2 months ago, the credit card statement I'd found tucked away in his desk drawer while looking for a stamp. It wasn't our main card. It was one he rarely used. There were charges I didn't recognize. A boutique jeweler in Granville, a town over. A florist I'd never heard of. When I'd asked, he'd smiled that easy smile of his, the one that used to make my heart flutter. "Planning some surprises for your birthday, Ellie." My birthday was still 4 months away, but I'd wanted to believe him. Oh, how I'd wanted to believe him. I had chosen blissful ignorance over the uncomfortable truth. And then there was Chloe. 6 weeks ago, she had started her campaign of infiltration. Her visits became more and more frequent, always when Michael was at his architecture firm. She always had a flimsy excuse. "I was hoping you could teach me your famous apple pie recipe," she'd say, despite never showing an interest in baking. Or, "I just wanted to ask your advice on marriage," a request that now seemed like a sick, ironic joke. She would stay for hours and I'd often find her and Richard in the garden, their heads close together in quiet conversation, conversations that would stop the moment I stepped outside. "Just talking about the roses," Richard would say a little too quickly. "Chloe's interested in learning about them." But Chloe had once complained that getting dirt under her fingernails made her feel absolutely primitive. The memories were tainted now, the innocence stripped away. The way she would let her hand linger on his arm. The way his cheeks would flush, a youthful pink I hadn't seen in years. I had dismissed it all as harmless vanity, an old man flattered by the attentions of a beautiful young woman. What a fool I had been. The phone rang, its shrill sound jarring me from my dark thoughts. It was Michael, his voice bright with an excitement that felt like a knife twisting in my heart. "Mom, did you sleep at all?" I was too excited to even close my eyes. "I'm still processing, sweetheart," I said carefully, my voice a stranger to my own ears. "It's wonderful news. Chloe is already making lists," he chattered on, oblivious. "Nursery themes, baby names. She mentioned that Dad seemed really happy, said he got a little emotional when she told him." My hand tightened on the receiver, my knuckles turning white. "When did she tell him?" "Oh, last week, I think," he said casually. "She wanted to share it with him first, you know? Said she was nervous about how you'd both react." "Isn't that sweet?" "Last week. A full week before she told my son, her husband." The final puzzle piece slammed into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake born of passion. This was a plan. A cold, calculated campaign. I knew then that I had to act. I couldn't live in this poison of uncertainty, but I couldn't confront Richard directly. Not yet. Not without proof. Not without understanding the full scope of this betrayal. My investigation began that morning. My first stop? His sanctuary. His private study. I had to know what other secrets were hiding behind that heavy oak door. The moment Richard's vintage sedan disappeared down our tree-lined street for his weekly golf game, I climbed the stairs. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread and determination. The door to his study creaked as I pushed it open, and I felt a fresh wave of guilt. For 43 years this room had been his private space, his sanctuary. A place of quiet thought, filled with books on history and biographies of great men. I had always respected that privacy. Now I wondered what that courtesy had cost me. The room smelled of him. A comforting, familiar mix of old books, worn leather, and his faint spicy aftershave. It was meticulously tidy, just like the man himself. Papers were stacked in neat piles. Books were arranged by subject. Everything in its place. Everything except his integrity, it seemed. I started with his heavy oak desk, my hands trembling as I slid open the top drawer. Pens, paper clips, business cards for his doctor and our handyman. Nothing. The second drawer held bills and correspondence, all seemingly innocent. But in the bottom drawer, tucked beneath a stack of old gardening magazines, I found it. A different checkbook and a thick folder of bank statements. This wasn't for our joint account, the one that paid the mortgage and the utilities, the financial bedrock of our shared life. It was a separate checking account at a different bank, an account I never knew existed. My breath caught in my throat. I sank into his plush leather chair, the cool material doing nothing to calm the fire in my veins as I pulled out the papers. The statements went back 6 months, and as I read, my confusion deepened into alarm. The numbers didn't make sense for a retired man living on a pension. Large, random deposits appeared every few weeks. $5,000 here. $8,000 there. One from 2 months ago was for a staggering $12,000. Where was this money coming from? It wasn't from our investments. This was something else entirely, something hidden. And the withdrawals were just as strange. Always in cash, always in large round numbers. $2,000. $3,500. $7,000. It was like a secret slush fund. A river of dark money flowing beneath the surface of our tranquil life. Was this what he was using to pay for jewelry and flowers for his mistress? Was this the price of his betrayal? My hands were shaking so badly I had to take several pictures of the statements with my phone to get a clear image. I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it, tucking the folder back beneath the magazines. But the tidy room now felt sinister, its orderliness a clever mask for the chaos brewing underneath. As I was closing the drawer, the sound of a car in the driveway sent a jolt of pure panic through me. I rushed to the window, my heart leaping into my throat. It wasn't Richard's sedan. It was Chloe's sleek silver convertible. I watched as she emerged, not in one of her usual flowing dresses, but in tight jeans and a fitted sweater that did nothing to suggest a pregnancy. She didn't head for the front door. Instead, she walked with a purposeful stride around the side of the house, toward the back garden, a place that was quickly becoming the scene of all my darkest suspicions. My mind raced. This was an opportunity. I slipped downstairs, my feet silent on the plush runner, and positioned myself by the kitchen window, partially hidden by the sheer curtains. In the garden, our new gardener Leo was raking leaves near the old oak tree. He was a quiet man in his mid-30s with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. Richard had hired him a few months ago after our old gardener retired. Chloe approached him directly. Their body language wasn't flirtatious. It was tense, businesslike. They spoke in low, urgent tones that I couldn't make out. Leo kept shaking his head, looking agitated, almost fearful. At one point, Chloe reached into her expensive handbag and pulled out a thick, white envelope. Leo glanced nervously toward the house before taking it, his movements quick and furtive, shoving it deep into the pocket of his work jacket. Money. She was giving him money. But why? Richard handled all the household expenses, including paying Leo. 1,000 questions exploded in my mind, each more disturbing than the last. Before I could process it, another car pulled in. It was Michael's blue Honda. He was home early for lunch. This was a nightmare spiraling out of control. Why was my daughter-in-law secretly paying my gardener with what I suspected was money from my husband's secret bank account? This was deeper and darker than a simple sordid affair. I was standing on the edge of a rabbit hole, and I had a terrible feeling it went down a very, very long way. A few days later, a new, more insidious phase of Chloe's campaign began. An attack not on my marriage but on my mind. Michael stopped by after work alone this time. The easy, cheerful way he usually entered the house was gone. He seemed hesitant, his brow furrowed with a worry that was not his own. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where our family had shared thousands of meals, and refused a cup of coffee. "Mom," he began, his eyes troubled as he studied my face. "Are you feeling okay lately?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. A little tired, perhaps. Why do you ask?" I kept my voice light, but my internal alarms were screaming. I knew this wasn't his question. It was hers. He fidgeted with a loose thread on his sweater, avoiding my gaze. "It's just, Chloe's a little worried about you. She mentioned you seemed a bit forgetful, confused." He finally looked up at me, his eyes full of a painful conflict. "She said you misplaced your car keys 3 times last week, and that you couldn't remember the name of our new neighbor, Mrs. Gable." The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. The keys had been in my purse the whole time, right where I always kept them. I had mentioned Mrs. Gable's prize-winning roses to Michael just 2 days ago. These were lies. Small, plausible lies, carefully crafted to sound like loving concern. Chloe wasn't just trying to steal my husband. She was trying to steal my credibility. She was trying to poison my own son against me. She was laying the groundwork, brick by insidious brick, so that if I ever did try to expose her, my words would be dismissed as the ramblings of a confused, senile old woman. It was gaslighting, a word I'd read in magazines but never thought would apply to my life. And it was terrifyingly effective. I could see the seed of doubt she had planted in Michael's eyes. He loved me, but he loved his wife too, and he was caught in the middle. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. His skin was warm and familiar. "Michael, I promise you I am perfectly fine," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Maybe just a little tired. This baby news is a lot to take in for an old lady." I forced a warm smile, but inside a cold, hard fury was building. She was trying to isolate me, to turn my greatest ally into her pawn. She was playing a different kind of war, a psychological one, aimed at my very identity as a competent, rational woman. And for the first time I felt a tremor of real fear. How do you fight an enemy who convinces everyone you're crazy? How do you prove your own sanity? That's when I knew I couldn't just be reactive. I had to go on the offensive. She was trying to paint me as a frail, confused old woman. Have you ever had someone try to twist your reality like that, make you doubt your own mind? Let me know in the comments what you would have done in that moment. I truly need to know. My resolve hardened into something sharp and dangerous. That afternoon I sought a different kind of ally. I took a freshly baked lemon loaf over to my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, white-haired woman who spent most of her days on her porch swing. Her body might have been slowing down, but her eyes were sharper than anyone gave her credit for. As we sat sipping iced tea, I casually brought up Chloe. "She's been stopping by a lot lately," I said. "It's nice to have her company." Mrs. Henderson took a slow sip, her eyes twinkling over the rim of her glass. "Oh yes, Eleanor," she said, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. "That Chloe is over here quite a bit when Michael's at work. Pretty car." She paused, then leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And she spends a lot of time in the backyard with that nice young gardener Leo. Talking, always talking. Seemed mighty serious for a chat about petunias if you ask me. Last week I saw her hand him something. Looked like an envelope." Mrs. Henderson's words were a cold confirmation of what I had seen. Chloe's visits weren't random. They were strategic. She was managing her assets, so to speak, Richard, Leo, and the secrets they all shared. The full weight of the conspiracy settled on me. It was a web, intricate and sticky, and I was caught in the middle. Chloe wasn't just an adulteress. She was a master manipulator. A puppeteer pulling the strings of the men in my life. I realized I was fighting a war on multiple fronts. I had to prove the affair, uncover the financial mystery, and now I had to defend my own sanity. I felt a surge of adrenaline. a warrior spirit I hadn't felt in years. She thought I was a pathetic old woman? She was about to find out how wrong she was. My next move had to be bold. I needed to find something that she couldn't explain away, something that would blow her web of lies to pieces. And I had a terrible suspicion about where to start looking. The next phase of Chloe's assault was not on my mind, but on my heart. It was an act of casual cruelty, a theft designed to wound me in the most personal way imaginable. A few mornings later, I was getting ready for a charity luncheon I hosted every year. It was a formal affair, and I decided to wear my grandmother's brooch. It wasn't the most valuable piece I owned in terms of money, but in terms of sentiment it was priceless. A simple, elegant piece of filigreed silver with a delicate cluster of seed pearls at its center. It was my most treasured possession. My grandmother had worn it on her wedding day. A small beacon of hope and love. My mother had worn it on hers. It was a legacy, a tangible link to the strong, loving women I came from. I had always dreamed of pinning it on the dress of Michael's first daughter on her own wedding day. But it was gone. I opened the velvet-lined jewelry box, my fingers going to the specific small compartment where it always rested. The compartment was empty. A frantic, sickening panic clawed at my throat. I searched wildly, my hands trembling as I sifted through necklaces and earrings, their cold metal feeling alien against my skin. I emptied the entire box onto the soft quilt of my bed. A cascade of gold, silver, and gemstones. It wasn't there. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. I was meticulous with my things. I always put it back in its specific spot. When was the last time I'd seen it? And then a memory surfaced, sharp, ugly, and undeniable. Chloe. She had been in my bedroom last week. She'd come upstairs with me, claiming she wanted to borrow a novel from my bookshelf. I had left her alone for just a few minutes while I went downstairs to fetch her a glass of water. It was all the time she needed. A cold dread washed over me, so intense it made me feel nauseous. No, she couldn't have. It was too brazen, too needlessly cruel. Later that day, when she stopped by, under the pretense of dropping off a pregnancy magazine for me to read, I confronted her. I worked to keep my voice even, to betray none of the roiling fury inside me. Chloe, have you by any chance seen my grandmother's pearl brooch? I seem to have misplaced it, and I'm getting worried. Her performance was flawless, Oscar-worthy. Her eyes widened in theatrical shock, her hand flying to her mouth in a gesture of dismay. Oh my goodness, Ellie. The beautiful silver one? No. Oh, that's just terrible. She immediately sprang into action, her face a perfect mask of concerned sympathy. Let me help you look. Where did you see it last? We'll turn this place upside down until we find it. I stood there, frozen, as she moved around my bedroom, peering under the bed, checking behind the curtains, clucking her tongue in feigned distress. She was a phenomenal actress. To see her pretending to search for an item I knew in my gut was likely already in a pawn shop somewhere, traded for a handful of cash, made my blood run cold. She wasn't just a liar. She was a thief who stole history, who stole memories, who stole dreams of the future. This act, more than the whispered threat at the dinner table, more than the insidious gaslighting, felt like the ultimate violation. The affair was about my husband. The gaslighting was about my son. But this was an attack directly on me, on my past, on my very identity as the matriarch of this family. She was trying to erase me piece by piece. As she knelt to look under the dresser, her voice dripping with fake pity. Oh, Ellie, I do hope it turns up. I know how much it meant to you. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt a clarifying, diamond-hard rage. This wasn't just about saving my marriage or protecting my son anymore. This was about justice. She thought a piece of jewelry was just an object, a bit of silver and pearl she could trade for cash. She didn't understand. It was a symbol of love and legacy. And in stealing it, she had made a fatal error. She had underestimated the woman she was robbing. She thought she was stealing from a pathetic old woman. But she was stealing from a matriarch. And she had just given me all the motivation I needed to burn her entire world to the ground. The rage from the stolen brooch was the fuel I needed. It burned away the last vestiges of my hesitation, my fear, my grief. It left behind only a cold, hard sense of purpose. That afternoon I went back upstairs, but not to my own room. I went to Michael's old bedroom, the one we'd converted into a pristine guest room with pale blue walls and white furniture. It was the room Chloe now used as her personal sanctuary during her frequent daytime visits, a beachhead she had established within my home. I knew if there were more secrets, they would be here. I didn't search frantically this time. My movements were slow, deliberate, methodical. I started with the dresser, sifting through her expensive, neatly folded clothes. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of cashmere sweaters that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, my fingers brushed against something hard and flat. It was a manila folder, tucked away as if it were contraband. My heart began to beat faster, a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I pulled it out and sat on the edge of the perfectly made bed, the pristine blue and white room suddenly feeling like the scene of a crime. With a deep breath, I opened the folder, and the contents confirmed my worst fears. It was a nightmare in black and white. It was a meticulously organized portfolio of my son's financial ruin. There were credit card statements in Michael's name, for cards I'd never heard him mention. The balances were staggering, each one a testament to desperate hope and devastating loss. $15,000 on one, $20,000 on another. There were loan applications also in his name for high-interest short-term loans from companies with predatory-sounding names. The amounts would cripple him financially for years, perhaps decades. And then there were the bank statements from his personal account, showing a horrifying pattern of huge cash withdrawals, thousands of dollars at a time, bleeding his hard-earned savings dry. At the very bottom of the folder was a handwritten list on a piece of expensive cream-colored stationery, in Chloe's elegant, looping script. It was a ledger of his downfall, a balance sheet of his shame. It listed websites I'd only ever heard of in movies. PokerStars $40,000. BetOnline $32,000. It listed names with frighteningly large sums next to them, names that sounded like they belonged to characters from a gangster film. Personal loan $25,000. The grand total, scribbled and circled at the bottom of the page, was a number that made me feel physically ill. $157,000. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My son, my responsible, hard-working son, who fretted over retirement savings and planned every major purchase for months, was drowning in a sea of gambling debt. The pieces of the puzzle didn't just click into place. They slammed together with the brutal force of a car crash. This was never about love or passion. It was never about a sordid affair between an old man and a young woman. This was about money. A lot of money. This was about my son's secret addiction, and the predator who had not only discovered it but had cultivated it for her own gain. Richard's secret bank account. It wasn't for gifts for a mistress. He was trying to save our son. He was funneling money to Chloe to keep her quiet, to pay the interest on these shadowy loans, to stop her from exposing the secret that would break my heart and destroy Michael's life. The story about the affair, it was a cover. A cruel, calculated lie designed by Chloe to hide a more shameful, more devastating truth. I photographed every single page with my phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. She had been grooming him, encouraging his addiction, letting him dig himself into a hole so deep he could never climb out alone. Then she had positioned herself as the only solution, the gatekeeper to his salvation, and the price was my family's silence, my husband's reputation, and our hard-earned retirement savings. I carefully placed the folder back where I found it, my mind reeling. The affair was a lie. A cruel, calculated lie to blackmail my husband. But what about the baby? If the affair wasn't real, then whose baby was it? My eyes drifted out the window toward the garden where Leo, the quiet gardener, was patiently trimming the hedges. The envelope of money, the hushed, tense conversations. A new, horrifying possibility began to take shape in my mind. A final betrayal that was almost too monstrous to comprehend. That evening the storm finally broke, not with a clap of thunder, but in the hushed, angry voices in my own backyard. I was in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes with a heavy heart, when I saw them through the window. Richard, Chloe, and Leo were gathered in the dim twilight near the garden shed. Even from a distance, the tension was palpable. It was not a friendly conversation. Leo was gesturing wildly, his face pale with distress, shaking his head over and over. Richard looked exhausted, a man pushed past his breaking point. Chloe stood with her arms crossed, her silhouette sharp and unyielding against the fading light, her expression cold and commanding. I couldn't just watch anymore. I dried my hands on a towel, my decision made. I slid the back door open and walked across the damp grass, the evening chill doing nothing to cool the fire in my veins. My footsteps were silent on the lawn, and I was only a few feet away when they finally noticed me. "Is there a problem here?" I asked, my voice cutting through the tense silence. It wasn't a question, it was a demand. The three of them turned to look at me, their faces a gallery of guilt. Leo looked like he was going to be physically sick. Chloe looked furious, her eyes flashing with anger at being interrupted. And Richard, my husband, looked like a man who had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders and was about to collapse beneath it. "Eleanor," he started, his voice a hoarse whisper, full of warning and exhaustion. "You shouldn't be out here." "In my own backyard?" I challenged, taking another step closer, my voice steady despite the chaos raging inside me. "I think I have a right to be. What have you all been discussing that I'm not allowed to hear?" The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, filled only by the chirping of crickets. Finally it was Leo who broke. He was a simple man, a decent man, and he couldn't bear the weight of the lies any longer. He turned to me, his eyes pleading for forgiveness, for an escape. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "This isn't right. Michael's a good man. He's always been good to me. He doesn't deserve this." "Leo," Chloe snapped, her voice like a whip, "we have an agreement. Remember it." "What agreement?" I demanded, my eyes boring into hers. "What hold do you have over everyone in this family?" Leo looked from her venomous face to Richard's defeated one, a desperate appeal in his eyes. "Tell her, Mr. Miller," he urged, his voice barely a whisper. "She's your wife. She deserves to know what's really happening." Richard closed his eyes for a long moment, as if gathering the last of his strength. When he opened them, they were filled with a pain so deep it took my breath away. "Ellie," he whispered, "it's not what you think. It's not what she wants you to think. I promise you." Chloe let out a laugh, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and ugly. "Oh, but it is, isn't it, Ellie? Your devoted husband, your pillar of the community, carrying on with his son's young, beautiful wife. It's such a deliciously sordid cliché." "I am not having an affair," Richard finally roared, his voice breaking with the force of his denial. "Ellie, I would never. I swear on our life together. But I can't explain without destroying our son's life," Chloe finished for him, her smile triumphant and cruel. "You see, Eleanor, your husband loves Michael too much to tell him the truth. The truth about his lovely wife. The truth about what I've been doing to keep the loan sharks away from his door." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. That's when Leo stepped forward again, unable to stay silent a moment longer, his face set with a grim determination. "She's been blackmailing him," he said, the words tumbling out as if a dam had broken inside him. "Threatening to destroy Michael, to expose his gambling debts to everyone. If Mr. Miller didn't cooperate. She made him pretend to be having an affair to cover it all up. Gambling debts." I held my breath, feigning a shock I didn't feel, waiting for the final blow. Richard nodded miserably. "Online poker, sports betting. It got out of hand, Ellie. He owes over $150,000. To very dangerous people. And she's the one who got him into it," Leo added, his voice thick with disgust. "She introduced him to the sites, she encouraged him to bet bigger and bigger. Then when he was in too deep to see a way out, she offered to help. For a price." I finally looked at Chloe, who was watching this revelation with a chilling, almost bored detachment. "What price?" "A comfortable life. A marriage that gives me access to your family's resources," she said simply, her hand moving to rest protectively on her stomach. "And insurance for the future. The baby," I whispered, the horrifying truth dawning on me. Leo couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the dark ground as he delivered the final, devastating truth that shattered the last piece of the puzzle. "The baby, Mrs. Miller. The baby is mine." The silence that followed was absolute. A vacuum where all the sounds of the night ceased to exist. Chloe just smiled, a predator who had finally laid all her cards on the table. "Well," she said, her voice bright and mocking, "I guess the cat's out of the bag now. The question is, Eleanor, what in the world are you going to do about it?" She thought she had me. She believed that revealing the whole sordid truth would paralyze me, that the combined shame of Michael's addiction and the sheer ugliness of her scheme would force me into a silent surrender. She saw the shock and pain on my face and mistook it for weakness. She didn't understand that for a mother, for a wife, the truth, no matter how terrible, is not a prison. It is a weapon. Later that night, long after Chloe had driven off with a final, triumphant smirk and Leo had quit on the spot, leaving a hastily scribbled note of apology on the back step, Richard and I finally talked. The walls between us, built over months of secrets and lies, came crumbling down in a torrent of confession and tears. He sat at the kitchen table, his proud shoulders slumped, his face buried in his hands, and told me everything. He confessed his fear the night he found the threatening emails on Michael's laptop. He told me about his desperation, about meeting Chloe in secret to give her envelopes of cash to pay off debts she had likely inflated or invented. The fake affair was her idea, a twisted form of insurance to ensure his continued cooperation and silence. Why Richard? I asked, my voice soft, the anger replaced by a deep, aching sorrow for the burden he had carried alone. Why didn't you just come to me? We've faced everything together for 43 years. His eyes, when he finally looked at me, were filled with tears. It was the first time I had seen my husband cry since the day his own father passed away. Because of your father, he whispered, and the word struck me with the force of a physical blow. My father had been a gambler, a good man in many ways, but a man with a sickness that had cost our family our home and my mother her peace of mind. His addiction had cast a long dark shadow over my childhood. Richard knew how deep those scars ran. I couldn't bear to see you look at Michael with that same disappointment I used to see in your mother's eyes, he said, his voice breaking. I was a coward. I thought I could handle it. Pay it off quietly, get him help, and make it all go away before you ever had to know. In that moment, the last of my anger toward him melted away, replaced by a profound, aching love. He had made a terrible mistake, guided by a misguided attempt to protect me. I reached across the table and took his hands in mine. They felt cold and frail. We are not my parents, I said firmly. And Michael is not my father. We will face this together. As a team. We were united again, our purpose clear. But I knew it wasn't enough. Chloe held all the power because her story, however twisted, was a threat. We needed more than just our word against hers. We needed irrefutable proof, a silver bullet to slay the monster she had become. And then I thought of the brooch. My grandmother's brooch. The next morning my mission was clear. My grief had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I sat down with the phone book and a cup of coffee and began calling pawnshops. My voice was steady, businesslike, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. I described the brooch in meticulous detail. The first call was a bust. The second owner was rude. On the fifth call I almost gave up hope. But on the sixth, a man named Mr. Goldstein, the kind, elderly owner of a small shop downtown, cut me off mid-description. A silver filigree brooch with a cluster of seed pearls? Ma'am, I remember it distinctly. A young blonde woman came in with it about a week and a half ago. Looked very upset. Said it was an inheritance she had to part with for family medical bills. His voice was tinged with sympathy. I felt bad for her, so I gave her a fair price. It's a beautiful piece. I haven't even put it out for sale yet. Mr. Goldstein, I said, my voice urgent with relief. That brooch was stolen from me. That young woman is my daughter-in-law. Please, can you hold it for me? I will pay you whatever you gave her, plus extra for your trouble. He agreed instantly. Hanging up the phone, I felt a surge of cold triumph. Chloe was reckless. Her greed and her arrogance made her sloppy. This was the proof I needed that she was a common thief. And it gave me an idea. A person this reckless, this arrogant, would surely have left other trails. I knew she must have gotten a paternity test done at some point. It was the ultimate trump card in her twisted game of blackmail. But she was too smart to just leave it lying around for me to find. I couldn't hope to stumble upon it by chance. I would have to be smarter. I would have to set a trap of my own. My plan was simple, and its success hinged entirely on Chloe's colossal arrogance. She believed I was a fragile, forgetful old woman, and I was going to use the very caricature she had created against her. I just had to plant the right seed of information and let her own paranoia and desperate need to feel superior do the rest of the work for me. The next time she came over, ostensibly to check on her poor dear father-in-law, I was ready. As she sat at the kitchen table, sipping the tea I had graciously served her and chattering about her latest pregnancy cravings, I arranged for my cell phone to ring. I'd asked my neighbor, the sharp-eyed Mrs. Henderson, to call me at precisely 10:15 a.m. It was a piece of theater and I was the lead actress. "Hello." I answered, my voice deliberately loud and slightly flustered. I walked around the kitchen, pacing as if I were agitated, making sure I was in Chloe's line of sight. "Yes, this is Eleanor Miller." "What? A charge on my credit card? For how much? Good heavens. From where?" "The Columbus Diagnostic Center?" I made sure to say the name of a real but incorrect medical facility. I knew there were at least 3 major labs in the city. I saw Chloe freeze out of the corner of my eye. Her teacup paused halfway to her lips. Her body went rigid. I had her attention. No, that can't be right." I continued into the phone, feigning confusion. "I haven't been there. My last checkup was with Dr. Evans. This must be a mistake. A very expensive mistake." I listened for a moment longer, then hung up with a dramatic, weary sigh. I turned to Chloe, my face a perfect mask of worried confusion, playing the part of the befuddled senior she thought me to be. "That is the strangest thing. The credit card company says there's a charge for over $1,000 on my card from some medical lab. I have to sort this out." She couldn't help herself. It was exactly the opening a narcissist like her craves, a chance to correct someone, to demonstrate her superior knowledge. It was irresistible. "Oh, Ellie, that's just awful," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "But you must have misheard the name. It can't be the Columbus Diagnostic Center." She smiled a little smugly, taking the bait completely. "My prenatal clinic uses GeneLink Diagnostics downtown. They handle all the advanced testing. Maybe there was a mix-up with their billing system, and they charged the wrong Miller." Bingo. I let a look of dawning comprehension cross my face. "Oh, GeneLink? Are you sure, dear? My memory these days." I let the sentence trail off, letting her believe her gaslighting had been a complete success. "I'm positive," she said, patting my hand with condescending reassurance. "You should call the bank back and give them the right name. I'm sure it's just a simple clerical error." The next morning, after Richard had left for an early appointment, I made a different call. My hands were trembling but my voice was steady. I created a brand new, anonymous email address, something simple and plausible like chloemiller1996@email.com, and then I dialed the number for GeneLink Diagnostics. I took a deep breath and pitched my voice a little higher, a little more frantic, channeling my inner distressed young mother-to-be. "Hi, yes, my name is Chloe Miller," I began, twisting a napkin in my hands to make my voice sound genuinely anxious. "I am so sorry to bother you, but I am in a bit of a panic. I was there last week for a private paternity test, and I think in all the stress of the pregnancy, I've completely misplaced the results paperwork. My husband is getting antsy and is there any possible way you could send me a digital copy?" The receptionist, a young woman named Brenda, was immediately sympathetic. "Of course, ma'am, I understand completely. Let me just verify a few things to protect your privacy. Can you confirm your date of birth and the names that were on the test?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the crucial moment. Thanks to the documents I'd found in Michael's old room, I had her date of birth memorized. "Yes, it's June 12, 1996. The names on the test were Michael J. Miller and Leo M. Santos." I said the last name quickly, as if embarrassed to even admit it. There was a pause and the sound of typing. "Okay, I see it right here, Mrs. Miller. Not a problem. I just need an email address to send the secure PDF to." I gave her the new address, my voice barely a whisper. She promised it would be sent within the hour. I hung up, my entire body trembling with a mixture of terror and triumph. 15 minutes later, an email notification popped up on my laptop. I clicked it open, entered the temporary password the receptionist had given me, and there it was. A clinical black and white PDF that held the absolute undeniable truth. Alleged father 1 Michael J. Miller. Probability of paternity, 0%. Alleged father 2 Leo M. Santos. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. I printed the single sheet of paper. It felt heavier than its weight, imbued with the power to end this nightmare. This paper wasn't just a lab result. It was justice. It was vindication. And it was the centerpiece for a final family dinner I was about to arrange. The stage was set. The final act was about to begin. I spent the next 3 days preparing for that Sunday dinner not as a homemaker, but as a general preparing for a final decisive battle. Every detail was a strategic move. Every choice a carefully placed piece on the chessboard. This would not be an ambush. It would be a meticulously executed checkmate. I called Michael on Thursday evening, carefully pitching my voice to sound warm, loving, and perhaps a little contrite. "Sweetheart," I said. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I feel just terrible that we didn't get to celebrate properly last time. There was so much excitement. I want to have you and Chloe over for a special dinner this Sunday. Just family. To really truly celebrate this baby and the next chapter of our family." "Oh, Mom, that's wonderful," he exclaimed, his voice flooded with a relief that made my heart ache. "Chloe has been a little worried that you were upset about something. She thought maybe the news was too much of a shock. This will mean the world to her." Oh, if only he knew, I thought. The real shock was yet to come. I spent all of Saturday in a flurry of purposeful activity. This was not cooking. This was crafting an atmosphere. I baked Michael's favorite pot roast, the one with the carrots and potatoes that turned soft and sweet, letting the rich, comforting aroma fill every corner of the house. I kneaded dough for homemade bread, the repetitive physical motion of pushing and folding calming my nerves, focusing my mind. I baked the apple pie from my grandmother's recipe, the sweet scent of cinnamon and baked apples a fragrant armor against the deceit that had invaded our home. This house would smell of love, truth, and tradition, a stark, mirroring contrast to the web of lies we were about to unravel. Richard watched me, a mixture of awe and anxiety in his eyes. We were a team again, moving around the kitchen in a silent practice dance, united by a shared purpose. "Are you sure about this, Ellie?" he asked quietly as I polished the silver, his voice barely a whisper. "It's going to be explosive. Explosions are necessary to clear away rubble, Richard," I told him, my voice firm as I buffed a fork to a brilliant shine. "So we can see what's left of the foundation and start to rebuild. She thrives on chaos and drama. She expects tears and accusations. We are going to give her something she won't know how to handle. Quiet dignity and irrefutable truth. Thank you so much for sticking with me on this journey. It means the world to me. If you're still here, still on my side as I prepare for this final battle, just type the number 1 in the comments so I know you're with me. It helps more than you know." We're about to head into the final confrontation. On Sunday afternoon, I set the table. I used our best china, the wedding set with the delicate platinum trim that had sat in the cabinet for years, waiting for an occasion special enough. The irony was not lost on me. These symbols of marital commitment, of vows and fidelity, were about to bear witness to the ultimate betrayal of those very things. The DNA test result was tucked safely inside a plain manila envelope, resting on the sideboard like a verdict waiting to be read. Chloe arrived, radiant in a flowing emerald green dress that emphasized the slight curve of her belly. Her hand rested protectively on it, the very picture of beatific motherhood. She was glowing with the smug satisfaction of a woman who believes she holds all the cards, that she has already won the game. "Ellie!" she exclaimed, kissing my cheek with a practiced affection that made my skin crawl. "Everything smells absolutely divine. You've gone to so much trouble." "No trouble at all, dear," I said, my smile serene, my voice a placid lake over a raging current. "Family is worth every effort." I watched her as she took her seat, her eyes scanning my face, trying to read me. She was puzzled by my calm, cheerful demeanor. My complete lack of hostility was unnerving to her. She didn't know whether to be relieved or suspicious. She had no idea she wasn't a guest at a celebratory dinner. She was the guest of honor at her own downfall. The first part of the dinner was a masterclass in deception, a piece of theater so convincing it almost made me doubt my own reality. We made small talk, the conversation flowing over the appetizers with a surreal normalcy. Chloe, ever the actress, described her morning sickness with a delicate, long-suffering sigh that was meant to elicit sympathy. Michael, my dear clueless son, shared an amusing story about a difficult client at his firm. Richard, playing his part perfectly, asked gentle questions about the baby's due date and whether they had started thinking of names. To anyone looking in through the dining room window, we were the perfect picture of a happy, multi-generational family on the cusp of a joyous new chapter. But I was watching her. I was studying her every move, every flicker of her eyes. I noted how her gaze would dart to Richard whenever she thought I wasn't looking, a silent, smug reminder of the power she thought she held over him. I noted how her hand flew to her stomach not with a mother's protective instinct, but as a shield, a prop in her elaborate performance, a symbol of the leverage she thought made her untouchable. She was playing a role, but she was about to forget her lines because I was rewriting the entire script. As I served the main course, the pot roast that Michael loved so much, its familiar aroma filling the room, I casually began to steer the conversation toward its final, inevitable destination. "You know," I said, my voice light and conversational as I passed the gravy boat to Michael, "I've been thinking a lot about family traits lately, about genetics. It's all so fascinating." I saw her fork pause halfway to her mouth, a tiny, almost imperceptible hesitation. "Genetics?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. I hummed, taking a bite of a carrot. "It's just fascinating how things get passed down through the generations. Eye color, hair texture, even something like a stubborn chin." I smiled warmly at Michael, who was happily slathering his roast with gravy. "You have your father's blue eyes, but you definitely have my stubborn chin." He laughed, a full genuine sound that made my heart ache. "Thanks for that, Mom. I wonder what this little one will look like," I continued, my gaze sweeping over Chloe's stomach before returning to her face. "Will he have Michael's dark hair? Or your beautiful blonde, Chloe? Will he be tall like the Millers? It's all such a wonderful mystery." "Well, it's impossible to predict," she said a little too quickly, her smile tightening at the edges. "Genetics can be surprising." "Oh, but modern science is so advanced now, isn't it?" I said, taking a deliberate sip of my wine, savoring the moment. "They can tell you so much about a baby, even before it's born. All sorts of genetic screenings, and things like DNA testing, paternity confirmation. It's really quite remarkable." The word paternity hung in the air, heavy and sharp as a guillotine's blade. Chloe went utterly still. The color drained from her face, leaving a pale, waxy sheen under the warm chandelier light. Richard, my silent co-conspirator, set down his fork with a soft clink, his cue that the moment had arrived. "DNA testing?" Michael asked, still blissfully unaware of the tension that was crackling around him like static electricity. "You mean like those ancestry kits people buy online?" "Among other things," I said, my eyes locked on Chloe's, refusing to let her look away. "They can also determine parentage with almost perfect accuracy. Very useful when there are questions about certain family relationships." "What an odd topic for a dinner conversation," Chloe managed, her voice thin and reedy. "Is it?" I tilted my head, my smile never wavering. "I think it's quite relevant, actually." Slowly, deliberately I stood up. I walked to the sideboard where the plain manila envelope lay waiting. My hands were perfectly steady as I picked it up, though my heart was pounding a rhythm of war against my ribs. I returned to the table and stood behind Chloe's chair, a specter of judgment she had never seen coming. I placed the envelope on the polished wood in front of her. The sound it made in the silent room was as loud as a gunshot. "Chloe dear," I said, my voice no longer light, but gentle and implacable as steel. "I believe this belongs to you." Michael frowned, his brow crinkling in confusion as he reached for the document. "What is this?" "Mom, don't," Chloe whispered, her voice a strangled plea, a desperate last-ditch attempt to stop the inevitable. But it was too late. I watched my son's face as he pulled out the single sheet of paper and began to read. I saw the confusion melt into dawning comprehension, then shatter into utter, soul-crushing devastation. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the weight of a life built on lies. "Leo Santos?" Michael finally whispered, his voice barely audible, raw with a pain I could feel across the table. "Who the hell is Leo Santos?" Richard answered him, his voice quiet but clear, filled with a terrible sadness. "Our former gardener, son." Every head turned to Chloe. her carefully constructed world, her web of lies, her entire future, had just been obliterated by a single sheet of paper. The performance was over. The hour that followed was the most excruciating of my life. The beautiful dining room, a place that had witnessed so many happy memories, birthdays, anniversaries, Christmases, became a courtroom where my son's heart was systematically broken in front of my eyes. His face, usually so open and full of life, crumpled. The devastation was absolute. It wasn't just the baby. In that single terrible moment he understood everything. The late-night phone calls he'd thought were from clients. The unexplained exhaustion he'd attributed to work stress. The way his savings account had dwindled away. The lie about the affair, which he now understood was a shield his father had held up to protect him. It all came crashing down on him at once. He looked at Chloe, and for the first time, he saw her not as the woman he loved, but as the architect of his ruin. There was no anger in his eyes yet, just a profound, hollowed-out sorrow. "You knew," he said, his voice thick with a disbelief so deep it was almost childlike. "All this time. You knew I had a problem and you pushed me deeper. You told me it was just a game. You encouraged it." Chloe, desperate now, tried to spin one last web of lies. She burst into tears, real or fake I couldn't tell and didn't care, and launched into a frantic, rambling story. "I was trying to help you, Michael. I was trying to protect you," she cried, her voice rising hysterically. She tried to paint herself as the victim, a woman trapped, forced into desperate measures. She even tried to resurrect the lie about Richard, claiming he had taken advantage of her vulnerability, that she was caught between two powerful men. But the lies sounded hollow now, pathetic and transparent in the face of the cold, hard truth printed on the paper in Michael's hand. "Help me," he repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet as the pieces clicked together in his mind with agonizing clarity. "You helped me by getting me deeper in debt? By using my shame to blackmail my own father into pretending he was a monster, just to cover your tracks." He let out a single bitter laugh that held no humor, only pain. "And Leo? A good man trying to make a living. Did you seduce him too? Was he just another pawn in your sick, twisted game?" "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered, her defense crumbling into pathetic excuses. "I was lonely and he was kind to me." "So you destroyed his life too," Michael finished, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. He looked utterly broken. It was then that Richard spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of months of silence and his own painful sacrifice. "Son," he said, looking directly at Michael, his eyes pleading for understanding, "I need you to know with all my heart I never touched her. Not once. I let you believe that horrible lie because I couldn't bear to see you face this. I saw how much shame you were carrying and I thought I could carry it for you." Michael looked at his father, his eyes swimming with a complex mixture of pain, gratitude, and a dawning understanding of the depth of his father's love. "Dad," he choked out, "you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Richard said, his own voice cracking. "You're my son. But I should have trusted your mother. And I should have trusted you to be stronger than your mistakes." In that moment, amidst the wreckage of Chloe's lies, a bridge was rebuilt between father and son, forged in the fires of a terrible truth. There was nothing left for Chloe to say. Her weapons, deceit, manipulation, seduction, were all useless now. She sat there exposed, friendless, and utterly defeated. The cleanup was swift and silent. That very evening Michael packed her bags. There was no shouting, no screaming. Just the quiet, methodical sounds of drawers opening and closing, of a life being dismantled and erased. Her expensive designer suitcases were stacked by the front door like a fortress of failure. She had nowhere to go, no family who would take her in, no allies left. The puppeteer had finally had her strings cut. As Michael carried the last of her expensive leather suitcases to her convertible parked in our driveway, Chloe made one final, desperate plea. The cool night air seemed to have sobered her from her hysteria. She turned to me, her face pale and tear-streaked in the harsh, unforgiving glare of the porch light. The arrogant queen who had presided over my dinner table just hours ago was gone, replaced by a frightened, desperate girl who had overplayed her hand and lost everything. "What about the baby?" she asked, her voice trembling, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. "He's your grandchild in a way. You can't just abandon him." He's innocent in all of this. Please, Eleanor. She was right about that. The child, this unborn baby boy, was the only true innocent in this entire sordid mess. And in that moment, looking at her shivering in the autumn chill, I felt something shift inside me. The white-hot rage had cooled, leaving behind not hatred, but a profound and weary sadness. Sadness for the lives she had damaged, including her own. Sadness for the child who would be born into this chaos. Vengeance suddenly felt small and petty. It wouldn't mend my son's broken heart or undo the lies. What I wanted was peace. What I wanted was a clean break and a chance for everyone, even her, to heal. I stepped forward, pulling my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. "The baby will be fine, Chloe," I said, my voice calm and even. This calmness, I could see, seemed to unsettle her more than any shouting or screaming would have. She had been prepared for a fight, not for quiet resolution. She stared at me, her eyes wide with bewilderment. "What do you mean?" "I mean I took the liberty of making a phone call this afternoon," I explained, my voice steady. "After I confirmed the results of your test. I called Leo. I still had his number from when he worked for us. It was a difficult conversation, but he deserved to know the truth. I told him what happened, and I got the number for his sister. She lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. Her name is Maria." Chloe's mouth fell open. She was utterly speechless, her calculating mind unable to process this unexpected turn of events. "I spoke with Maria for a long time," I continued, pressing my advantage. "She's a good woman. A pediatric nurse, as it turns out. She has 2 children of her own. She was shocked, of course, and furious with her brother. But she loves him. She said Leo is a good man who made a foolish mistake with a very manipulative woman." I let that last part hang in the air for a moment, letting the truth of it sink in. "She is willing to take you in. She has a spare room. She will help you through the birth and help you get on your feet. She wants her nephew to have a chance at a stable, honest life, away from all of this." She looked at me as if I had sprouted a second head. You arranged for me to go to Arizona?" The question was a whisper of disbelief. "I arranged for you to have a chance to start over," I corrected gently but firmly. "I arranged for your son to have a chance to be raised honestly, without lies and manipulation tangled up in his life from day one. What you do with that chance, Chloe, is entirely up to you. But you will not be doing it here. You will not be a part of this family's life ever again." I handed her a piece of paper on which I had written Maria's address and phone number. She took it, her fingers fumbling, her eyes still wide with shock. For the first time since I had met her, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes that wasn't calculation or malice. It might have been shame. Or it might have just been the utter shock of unexpected grace. As her car's red taillights disappeared down our quiet suburban street, I didn't feel a surge of triumph. There was no satisfaction in her exile. There was only the deep, quiet relief that the lies were finally over. I had not destroyed her. I had simply removed her power to destroy us. And that, I realized, made all the difference. The seasons changed. The brilliant, fiery reds and golds of that Ohio autumn faded into the quiet, cleansing white of winter, and then burst forth again in the hopeful, tender green of spring. Our family, like the world outside our window, began the slow, difficult, and necessary process of healing. 6 months after that terrible dinner, a small plain envelope arrived in the mail. There was no return address, but I recognized the elegant, looping script immediately. My hand trembled as I opened it. Inside was not a letter, but a single photograph. It was of a beautiful, healthy baby boy, swaddled in a blue blanket. He had a full tuft of dark hair and the same kind, gentle eyes as his father, Leo. On the back of the photo, Chloe had written 5 words. "His name is David. Thank you." I felt a sense of closure, a quiet prayer that perhaps she had taken the second chance she'd been given, for her son's sake if not her own. I tucked the photo away. A final postscript to the darkest chapter of our lives. Michael, my brave, wonderful son, faced his demons with a courage I had never seen in him before. He started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings twice a week, every week. He was humbled but not broken. He talked about his shame, his addiction, and the emptiness he had tried to fill with the fleeting false thrill of a win. It was a long, hard road, but he walked it one day at a time. And on that road he met Sarah, a kind, steady woman with a laugh that could light up a room. She was in recovery for a different kind of addiction, and they found in each other a shared strength, an unshakable honesty, and an open, gentle love that was the antithesis of everything he'd had with Chloe. And Richard and I? We found our way back to each other across the chasm of secrets and betrayal. It wasn't easy. There were difficult conversations, moments of lingering pain. But the lies had been burned away, and what remained was the bedrock of 43 years of shared history. The betrayal had fractured our foundation, but in the painstaking work of rebuilding, we created something stronger, something more honest. We talked, really talked for the first time in years, about our fears, our failings, and our unwavering love for our son and for each other. Our marriage, tested by fire, was now forged into something unbreakable. A year and a half after that final fateful dinner, our family gathered again around that same mahogany table. But this time the joy was real. The laughter was genuine. The food tasted of celebration, not of dread. In a high chair between Michael and his new wife, Sarah, sat our true grandchild, a beautiful baby girl named Lily. She had her father's dark, curious eyes and her mother's infectious, joyful laugh. As I held her in my arms, her warm, tiny body snuggled against my chest, her little hand wrapped tightly around my finger, I knew our family had survived. We were scarred, yes, but we were whole again. We were stronger. I learned that sometimes the greatest victories aren't the loud, dramatic confrontations or the public reckonings. They are the quiet, daily choices. The choice to face the truth, however painful. The choice to offer forgiveness instead of seeking revenge, for your own peace of mind. The choice to fight for the people you love, even when they have lost the strength to fight for themselves. At 65, I learned that it's never too late to find your strength, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon a woman has is the quiet dignity of knowing her own worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Now, I'm curious about you who have listened to my story. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever been through a family betrayal like this, where the truth was more complicated than you could ever imagine? Please share your stories in the comments below. I read every one. If my story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe for more stories from the heart. Thank you for listening, really thank you for being here with me until the very end.